I'm 87 years old and I can feel the edges of my life closing in. Not in a dramatic way, just in the quiet ways. The way I count my pills in the morning. The way the house creaks louder now that it's mostly empty. The way my name shows up more often in hospital files than in birthday cards. There's one thing I ignored my whole life. It wasn't money. I made plenty of that. It wasn't health. At least not in the beginning. I worked hard, stayed busy, kept moving. The thing I ignored was smaller than that, softer, easier to put off. I ignored the simple act of being there. I always thought there would be more time to sit, to listen, to linger, more time to say what I meant, more time to look someone in the eye without glancing at a clock. I was born in 1938. Grew up in a small house with thin walls and a father who believed a man's worth was measured by how tired he looked at the end of the day. He didn't talk much. When he did, it was usually about work. My mother filled the silences with movement, washing dishes, folding laundry, keeping everything from falling apart. I learned early that being useful was the same as being loved. By the time I was in my 20s, I had a steady job at a manufacturing plant. It was honest work, long hours, loud machines, steel-toed boots. I remember feeling proud of the grease on my hands. It meant I was becoming someone. I married at 26. She was 24. Soft-spoken, patient, smarter than I was in ways I didn't fully understand. On our wedding day, she held my hand like it was something fragile. I held hers like it was something permanent. We had our first child 2 years later, a daughter. I remember standing in the hospital room looking at her tiny face and thinking, I will give you everything. And I did. Everything except the one thing that mattered most. I gave her a house in a safe neighborhood. I gave her school supplies before she asked. I gave her piano lessons, braces, a car at 16. But when she'd come into the living room with a drawing in her hand, I'd glance up from the newspaper and say, That's nice, sweetheart, without really seeing it. When she'd sit at the edge of my chair and tell me about a friend who hurt her feelings, I'd nod while checking my watch, already thinking about the next shift. I told myself I was tired. I told myself she'd understand someday. I told myself love was obvious. We had a son 3 years later. He followed me around the house like a shadow, wanted to hand me tools in the garage, wanted to sit beside me during baseball games. I let him sit there, but I didn't talk much, didn't ask much, didn't think I had to. I thought being physically present in the same room was enough. In my 30s and 40s, work became everything. I climbed from the factory floor to a supervisor position. More responsibility, more hours, more respect. I liked the respect. Men would shake my hand a little firmer. Neighbors would ask my opinion on things. My name meant something in that building. At home, though, my name started to mean less. Not suddenly. Not with shouting or slammed doors, just small things. Family dinners where the kids talked mostly to their mother. School events I missed because of something urgent. Vacations I cut short because the plant needed me. I remember one night my wife sat across from me at the kitchen table after the kids had gone to bed. She looked tired in a way that wasn't physical. You're here, she said, but you're not really here. I laughed it off, told her she worried too much, told her I was doing this for all of us. That's the thing about ignoring something important. It doesn't scream, it whispers, and you get very good at tuning it out. In my 50s, the kids moved out within 2 years of each other. The house got quieter. I told myself that was natural. That's what children are supposed to do. Our daughter married and moved 2 states away. Our son took a job across the country. They called it first, Sundays mostly. Short conversations, updates about work, about their own children. I'd listen, give advice if asked. Keep it practical. How are you feeling? My daughter asked me once. Fine, I said, still working. What I didn't say was that I didn't know how to talk about feelings. I had ignored that part of myself so long it felt foreign. My wife tried to fill the space between us after the kids left. She'd suggest we take walks or sit on the porch in the evening. I'd sit there, but my mind would drift to bills, to repairs, to things that felt measurable. One afternoon, she brought out an old photo album, pictures of the kids when they were small, finger paintings, missing teeth, birthday cakes with uneven frosting. "Do you remember this?" she asked, pointing to a picture of our son holding up a homemade trophy. I squinted at it. "What was that for?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He made it because you couldn't come to his game. He said if you couldn't see him win one, he'd bring the trophy to you." I don't remember what I said after that. Probably something dismissive. Something about how kids forget those things, but they don't. They just stop mentioning them. The turning point came when I was 68. I had just retired. Finally. There were speeches at the plant, a watch with my name engraved on the back, applause. I drove home that day expecting, I don't know, relief, maybe, a sense of arrival. Instead, I found my wife sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded, the same table where she'd told me years ago I wasn't really there. She had been to the doctor. Cancer. It had been there a while, apparently. She hadn't told me how worried she was during the tests. Didn't want to distract me from my big final year. I remember feeling angry, not at her, at the unfairness, at the timing. I told her, "Now we'll have all the time in the world." But we didn't. Chemo appointments replaced my morning commutes. Hospital rooms replaced the factory floor. I sat beside her bed and tried finally to be present. I held her hand the way she'd held mine on our wedding day. Only now it felt fragile in a different way. We talked more in those months than we had in years, about the kids, about trips we never took, about arguments that in hindsight were never really about dishes or money. One night, when the machines in the hospital room were humming softly, she said, "I didn't need more things. I just needed you." There wasn't anything I could say to that. She died 3 months after I retired. The house became silent in a way I'd never known. Not peaceful, just hollow. The first night alone, I walked from room to room, touching the backs of chairs, the edges of picture frames, like I was trying to confirm they were still solid. The kids flew in for the funeral. They were kind, respectful, busy with their own families. I saw in their faces the adults they'd become, capable, self-sufficient, but there was a distance there, polite, careful. I realized then that I had taught them how to live without me, not because I was cruel, not because I didn't love them, because I was always almost there. In the years since, I've had a lot of time. Time to sit on that porch alone, time to look through the photo albums, time to replay conversations and notice the pauses I once ignored. I have grandchildren now. They visit on holidays. They're good kids. They hug me. They call me Grandpa. But I am a chapter in their lives, not the center of it, and that's as it should be. Still, sometimes I watch my grandson glance at his phone while I'm telling a story, and I see myself in him, the way attention slips away, the way we assume there will be another moment. I want to tell him, "Look up. This is it. I ignored the one thing my whole life that cannot be replaced. Not money, not status, not even health, attention. The simple, deliberate act of putting everything else down and saying without words, 'You matter right now.' I thought love was proven by sacrifice and provision. And in some ways it is, but love is also measured in minutes, in eye contact, in listening without planning your response. There are birthdays I attended but don't remember. School plays where I clapped but didn't truly watch. Evenings when my wife was trying to tell me she felt alone, and I answered with solutions instead of silence. None of it felt like a mistake at the time. That's the cruel part. Regret doesn't come from dramatic failures. It comes from small, reasonable decisions made over decades. I'll sit with them tomorrow. I'll take a day off next month. I'll open up when things slow down. Things don't slow down, they end. At 87, I don't have the energy to chase much anymore. My world has narrowed to this house, this chair, the sound of the clock in the hallway. Sometimes I sit with my wife's photo and talk out loud. I tell her about the weather, about the ache in my knees, about the way the light hits the kitchen table in the late afternoon. I practice being present with someone who isn't here. If you're listening to me now, I'm not asking you to quit your job or make grand gestures. Life is practical. Bills have to be paid. Responsibilities don't disappear because we want to sit and talk. But don't confuse providing with presence. Don't assume that because you're in the room, you're truly there. Look at the faces around your table. Really look. One day you'll be sitting where I am, counting pills, listening to the house breathe, wishing you could trade a promotion, a meeting, a perfectly mowed lawn for one more ordinary Tuesday evening with the people who loved you. I can't go back. I can't sit longer at that kitchen table in 1975. I can't kneel beside my son with that homemade trophy and say, "Tell me everything." I can't tell my wife in her healthy years that I see her. All I can do now is say it into the quiet. I see it now. I see what I missed. And I carry both the love and the regret together. They sit side by side in this old chest of mine. One doesn't cancel out the other. If this meant something to you, don't wait for a hospital room or an empty house to understand it. There is no dramatic ending to my story, no final lesson neatly wrapped up. Just an old man in a quiet house, finally learning the one thing he ignored his whole life. Be there, not someday. Now.